The vote was unanimous, not a single dissenting signal, not one flicker of hesitation across a chamber that had outlived empires, devoured rebellions, and quietly decided the fate of civilizations long before humanity ever looked up and wondered what waited among the stars. It happened without drama, without raised voices or spectacle, just a shift in light. In the vast, hollow expanse of the Galactic Assembly, where gravity itself was sculpted into elegant rings and alien forms hovered in layers of impossible geometry, the decision rippled outward like a silent pulse. Entities of plasma dimmed and brightened in cold agreement. Crystal intelligences refracted the verdict through shifting prisms, minds that existed only as fields of thought aligned in perfect, chilling consensus. A species had been judged, and the sentence was already sealed. Humanity is to be exiled beyond the mapped edge. Effective immediately. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They settled into the structure of space itself, recorded not just as sound but as fact, unchangeable, absolute, final, far away. Across the fragile blue sphere called Earth, the message arrived all at once, not transmitted, not broadcast imposed. Screens blinked in unison, from towering cityscapes to dimly lit apartments, from orbital stations to deep-sea research hubs. The same words appeared, perfectly translated, perfectly understood, no delay, no distortion, as if the universe itself had leaned down and whispered directly into the human mind. For a moment, the world forgot how to move. Airplanes continued forward, but pilots stared, hands frozen on controls. Crowds in neon-lit streets slowed, conversations collapsing into stunned silence. Somewhere, a child tugged at a parent's sleeve, asking a question that no one could answer. Exile, not destruction, not conquest, something colder, more deliberate. A decision that said, "You are not worth the risk of keeping." High above the planet, satellites adjusted their positions automatically, trying to trace the origin of the message. They found nothing. No source, no signal path, no beginning. Just the end of a conversation humanity had never been allowed to join. Deep within a fortified orbital station, alarms remained silent. Not because there was no threat, but because there was nothing to detect. No incoming fleet. No weapons charged. No countdown to impact, just inevitability. And yet, somewhere between the stillness and the shock, something shifted. It started small. A flicker in the human response. Not panic. Not collapse. Something subtler. Harder to define. On a quiet rooftop overlooking a restless city, a man read the message twice, then a third time. His brow furrowed, not in fear, but in thought. In a control room buried beneath layers of classified steel, an engineer leaned back in her chair, staring at the words as if they were a puzzle missing a crucial piece. And in the vacuum of orbit, aboard a station that did not officially exist, a single officer let out a slow breath and smiled, not because the situation was funny, but because it was familiar. Humanity had been underestimated before, dismissed, contained, pushed to the edges of maps drawn by others. And every time, it had done something unexpected. Back on Earth, the message remained, unchanging, absolute. A verdict carved into reality. The world was still quiet, still frozen in that impossible pause between what was and what came next. Then somewhere, soft at first, almost lost beneath the weight of it all, someone laughed, not loudly, not defiantly, just enough to break the silence, and once it cracked, the Galactic Assembly did not orbit a world. Worlds were temporary, fragile, emotional. The Assembly chose something older. It circled a dying blue giant, a star in its final, slow collapse, its surface boiling in silent violence, flares stretching outward like the last breaths of a fading god. Around it, the Assembly's structure unfolded in vast luminous rings layered with impossible precision. Gravity curved into corridors. Light bent into architecture. Entire civilizations had contributed to its design, and none of them fully understood it anymore. This was where decisions became law, and where law became fate. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Lyra Vance, human, alone. She felt it the moment she stepped into the chamber. Not hostility, not quite. Something colder, assessment. As if every presence in the room had already measured her, categorized her, and quietly filed her species under unresolved risk. Around her, the delegates manifested in forms that defied expectation. One shimmered like a column of living plasma, its edges crackling with contained energy. Another existed as a suspended lattice of crystal shards, refracting the blue light of the dying star into 1,000 shifting colors. Others had no fixed shape at all, just distortions in space, bending perception around them like gravity wells for thought itself. They did not sit. They did not breathe. They simply observed. You stand before consensus. A voice resonated, not spoken but impressed directly into her awareness. It was layered, ancient, carrying the weight of species that had survived long enough to forget fear. Lyra held her ground. Behind her, far beyond the chamber's reach, Earth's fleet waited in silent formation, tiny against the scale of what surrounded them. Human ships were compact, efficient, almost modest compared to the vast ornamental constructs of other civilizations. No sprawling superstructures, no displays of overwhelming force. Just function, just intent. Her mission briefing echoed in her mind, fragments of a plan that now felt painfully naive. Establish diplomatic standing. Secure trade agreements. Integrate peacefully into the interstellar community. That had been the hope. But hope had not been invited into this room. You expand without equilibrium, another presence added, colder, sharper. Your growth curves exceed acceptable thresholds. Your conflicts propagate beyond localized containment. Lyra's jaw tightened slightly. She had read their reports, seen how they described humanity, not as a culture, not as a people, but as a pattern. A variable that refused to stabilize. You are disruptive, a third voice concluded, its tone almost clinical. Not angry, worse, certain. For a moment the chamber dimmed, the light of the dying star filtering through layers of alien architecture, casting shifting shadows across forms that didn't quite cast shadows at all. It felt less like a meeting, and more like a verdict waiting for its final word. Lyra took a slow breath. She could feel her pulse steady but heavy, each beat a reminder of what she carried with her, not authority, not power, but representation. Billions of lives compressed into a single voice standing in a place that had already decided it didn't belong. You asked for dialogue, she said, her voice clear, cutting through the weight of their presence. We came in good faith. Silence followed. Not empty, not uncertain, just uninterested. Your presence here fulfills procedural requirements, the assembly responded. The outcome remains unchanged. There it was. Not negotiation, confirmation. Behind Lyra, unseen but deeply felt, Earth's fleet held position, waiting for a signal that would define everything that came next. Her mission had been to secure humanity's place among the stars. Instead, she had been summoned to witness its removal. And as the chamber's light shifted once more, reflecting off entities that had already moved on to the next calculation, Lyra realized something chilling. This wasn't the beginning of a conflict. It was the end of a conversation humanity had never truly been allowed to have. It didn't come back the same. The terms arrived without ceremony. No dramatic pause. No illusion of negotiation. Just a clean, precise transmission that cut through the chamber like a blade already mid-swing. Humanity will be relocated beyond the mapped edge. All systems, assets, and populations will comply. Resistance will result in containment. The words settled into Lyra's mind with a weight that felt engineered. Not to threaten, not to intimidate, but to remove the need for either. Around her, the assembly shifted, subtly, almost imperceptibly, but enough to signal closure. The decision was not being discussed anymore. It was being implemented. Exile, a word that sounded almost merciful until you understood what it meant out here. No coordinates, no trade routes, no communication networks, no return vectors. A region beyond the known lattice of space where even light struggled to carry information cleanly. A place not charted, not because it couldn't be, but because no one had ever needed to go there. Until now. You will be escorted, the assembly continued, its voice vast and indifferent. Your transition will be monitored to ensure compliance and stability. Escorted. The word echoed in Lyra's thoughts like a quiet insult. Not conquered. Not defeated. Managed. Back in the Sol system, the sky began to change. At first, it was nothing more than a shimmer, faint distortions at the edges of telescopic range. Then the shapes resolved, vast constructs slipping into position with impossible grace, their forms stretching across space like living architecture. Not warships in the human sense, no visible weapons, no aggressive maneuvers. But they didn't need them. They were everywhere, around Earth, around Mars, along the outer edges of the system, sealing every vector like a net drawn tight. Elegant, silent, absolute, a cage built from certainty. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Cale Vance stood with his hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the tactical display as red markers bloomed across every approach path. His crew moved with controlled urgency, voices low, disciplined, but beneath it all, tension coiled like a spring ready to snap. "They're not targeting us," one officer reported. "No weapons lock. No power spikes, just positioning." Cale nodded once. He understood. This wasn't an attack. It was something far more deliberate. "They're telling us we don't matter enough to fight," another muttered. Cale's gaze hardened slightly. No. They were saying something worse. Back in the assembly chamber, Lyra felt it too. That creeping pressure of inevitability pressing in from every direction. The knowledge that this decision had already reached Earth, that fleets were already moving, that the process of removing humanity from the galaxy had begun, with or without her acknowledgement. "You will comply," the assembly stated, final, immovable. "Your species lacks the capacity to alter this outcome." For a moment, Lyra said nothing. She let the silence stretch, let the weight of their certainty settle into the space between them. Because this right here, was the part they didn't understand. Humans weren't strongest when they were winning. They were most dangerous when they were cornered. Her mind flickered through images. Cities watching the sky, commanders waiting for orders, billions of people absorbing the same cold verdict all at once. Fear, yes. Confusion, absolutely. But beneath it, something else. Something the assembly had measured and misunderstood. Back on the Resolute, Cale finally turned from the display. "Orders, sir?" the officer asked again, quieter this time. Cale looked out toward the silent, overwhelming presence surrounding their system. He didn't see enemies. He saw a wall. And something in his expression shifted, not fear, not resignation. Recognition. "This isn't Exile," he said slowly. The crew waited. "It's dismissal." The word hung in the air, heavier than any threat, because dismissal meant the assembly believed the outcome was already decided, that humanity would follow the path laid out for it, that it would accept the boundaries drawn around it. Cale's lips pressed into a thin line. They didn't understand, not yet, but they would. Lyra closed her eyes. Just for a second, long enough to let the weight of their certainty settle, and break against something far more dangerous than fear. When she opened them again, she was smiling. Not the polite diplomatic smile she had worn since stepping into the assembly. Not the careful mask of a representative trying to earn a place at a table that had already been cleared of her. This one was different, quiet, knowing, and completely out of place. A ripple passed through the chamber, not visible in the way humans understood movement but felt, like a shift in pressure, a recalibration of attention. The assembly did not experience confusion often, but something about that expression didn't fit the outcome they had already calculated. "You think we didn't see this coming?" Lyra asked softly. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They cut cleanly through the layered consciousness of the assembly, disrupting the smooth, inevitable flow of their conclusion. No one answered. They didn't have to. But for the first time since the vote, they paused. Lyra took a step forward, not aggressive, not defiant, just enough to change the shape of the moment. "You've been watching us," she continued, "measuring us, modeling us. You think you understand how we grow, how we react, how we fit. A flicker, subtle, interest, dangerous because it meant attention. And you're right," she admitted, tilting her head slightly. "We are disruptive. We do escalate. We don't stay contained." Her smile widened just enough to sharpen the edges. "What you got wrong is assuming we've been doing it inside your system." The chamber dimmed, not physically but perceptually, as if the assembly itself had leaned closer, focusing. Behind Lyra, the space above the central platform shimmered. Then it unfolded, not as a weapon, not as a threat, but as information. A projection, vast, layered, impossibly detailed, burst into existence. Star maps, thousands of them, overlapping, interwoven, extending far beyond the clean, structured boundaries of the assembly's known space. At first they looked like noise, random data, unrefined. Then patterns began to emerge. Routes, corridors, entire pathways carved through regions the assembly had marked as unstable, inefficient, irrelevant. Places they had chosen not to explore because there was no reason to. No value, no order. Until now. "These are ours," Lyra said quietly. The maps shifted again, zooming in, revealing clusters, points of light scattered through the darkness between stars. Colonies, not hidden in the sense of stealth. Hidden in the sense of being overlooked. Stations built in gravitational eddies. Habitats anchored in the shadow of collapsed systems. Networks running through regions where standard navigation failed. Places no rational civilization would choose to expand into. But humanity had never been particularly concerned with rational expansion. "We didn't wait for permission," Lyra continued. "We didn't stay within the lines you drew. While you were debating whether we belonged, we were already moving beyond where you could see. The assembly processed the data, instantly, completely, and for the first time in its existence, its conclusions fractured. Because this wasn't a rebellion. It wasn't even resistance. It was something far more unsettling. Independence. You voted to exile us," Lyra said, her voice steady, almost gentle now. The maps expanded one final time, revealing the full scope of it. A vast, decentralized web of human presence stretching into the uncharted dark, beyond the assembly's reach, beyond its control. A civilization that had already stepped outside the system, before the system decided to push it out. She let the silence settle, let the realization take hold. Then she met the unseen gaze of beings who had just discovered a flaw in their own omniscience. "You didn't remove us," she said. A beat, calm, absolute. "You just admitted you never knew where we really were." The order did not echo, it moved. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Cale Vance didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The moment the words left him, "Execute Horizon Protocol," they cascaded through human space like a spark finding dry fuel. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then reality shifted. Across the Sol system, space itself seemed to inhale, not violently, not chaotically, but with a quiet, deliberate precision that made every trained instinct on the bridge scream at once. "Reading spatial distortions," an officer reported, fingers flying across the console. "Localized, no, distributed. This isn't a single event." Kyle didn't look at the data. He already knew what they would see. Because Horizon had never been designed as a weapon, it was an exit. The first gateway opened just beyond lunar orbit, a thin, luminous seam slicing through the void. No explosion, no surge of energy, just a line of light that widened with surgical calm, revealing something beyond it that didn't quite align with normal space. Then another opened, and another, hundreds, thousands. They bloomed across the system in perfect synchronization, near Mars, along the asteroid belt, at the edges of the Kuiper Drift, each one a doorway carved into places the assembly had never thought to watch. On the tactical display, the alien blockade didn't react at first. Their vast, elegant constructs held position, their models still calculating within a framework that assumed control, assumed containment. Then the data began to break. "They're recalibrating," a crew member said, tension threading through her voice. "Their formation is shifting. They're trying to compensate." "For what?" another asked. Cale answered quietly. "For being irrelevant." Beyond the viewport, human ships moved, not in panic, not in retreat, but with purpose. Entire fleets pivoted as one, aligning with the newly formed gateways. Civilian transports, cargo carriers, deep-range explorers. Everything that had once been anchored to the idea of Earth as center now flowed outward like a tide finally released. No collisions, no chaos, just motion. Calculated, prepared, ready. Far above, the alien vessels adjusted again, their presence tightening around a system that was already slipping through their grasp. They had come to enforce exile, to guide humanity to the edge of the map. But the map had changed. Back in the assembly chamber, the projections of human expansion still hovered, still impossible, still unraveling centuries of assumed dominance. And now layered over them came something new: live data, gateways opening, networks activating, Entire sectors lighting up beyond known space as human infrastructure, hidden, patient waiting came fully online. This wasn't defiance. It was departure. Lyra watched it unfold with quiet certainty, her expression unchanged as the assembly processed a reality it had not predicted. "You wanted us gone," she said, her voice carrying through the vast chamber with calm finality. No anger, no triumph. Just truth. Back on the Resolute, Kale stepped forward, eyes fixed on the unfolding exodus. The last defensive squadrons held position for a moment longer, just long enough to ensure nothing followed. Nothing interfered. Then, one by one, they turned. "Transmit," Kale ordered, across every known frequency, and several the assembly didn't even recognize. A message surged outward, threading through the same unseen corridors humanity had carved in secret. It bypassed blockades, ignored boundaries, spread like a signal that had never needed permission to exist. "You wanted us gone." A pause. Just long enough to be understood. Then, "We already left." The final ships entered the gateways, their silhouettes dissolving into light as the seams in space began to close behind them. One by one, system by system. No wreckage, no resistance, no war. Just a species, stepping beyond the reach of those who thought they could define its limits. And as the last gateway flickered and collapsed into nothing, leaving the alien fleet suspended around an emptying system, the realization finally settled in. Humanity hadn't fought the Exile. It had outgrown it. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was consequential. It stretched across the Sol system like a held breath that no one quite knew how to release. The vast alien constructs, once positioned with absolute certainty, remained suspended in perfect formation, their elegant geometries now guarding. Nothing, Earth still turned below them. But it was quieter, dimmer, not abandoned, no, but departing. Cities flickered with partial light. Orbitals powered down in stages. Long-range transmissions spiked, then vanished, as if entire networks were choosing to fall silent rather than be listened to. The system wasn't being destroyed. It was being left behind. On the command deck of one alien vessel, perception arrays swept across the region again and again, searching for the variable that had slipped through their calculations. Every scan returned the same answer: absence. No fleeing armadas, no hidden weapons, no resistance clusters waiting to strike, just a civilization, withdrawing with surgical precision. In the Galactic Assembly, the chamber remained illuminated, but no one spoke. The projections of human expansion, once dismissed as noise, now lingered like a wound in their understanding. A map that had no edges, a pattern that did not stabilize. For the first time in its long, ordered existence, the Assembly had no immediate conclusion. Far beyond their reach, under a sky that no chart had ever recorded, a new world turned slowly in the dark. Its oceans shimmered with unfamiliar light. Its continents breathed with untamed weather systems, raw, unclaimed, human. Ambassador Lyra Vance stood at the edge of a high observation platform, carved into pale stone that hadn't existed a year ago. The air was thinner here, touched with a faint metallic scent, and the wind carried a low, constant hum from distant construction, ships descending, habitats forming, a civilization unfolding in real time. Behind her, the final gateway pulsed. It was smaller than the others, quieter, a narrow seam of light suspended in the air like the last thread connecting two realities. Through it, the faint outline of Sol could still be seen, distant, familiar, already fading into irrelevance. A technician's voice came through her comm, steady but subdued. "All outbound traffic confirmed. No return signals pending. We're clear." Lyra didn't answer right away. Her eyes remained fixed on that narrowing line of light, on everything it represented: home, history, the weight of 1,000 decisions that had led to this moment. "They'll watch," someone said behind her. Not a question. Lyra gave the smallest nod. "Yes," she said softly. "And they'll try to understand." But understanding wasn't the same as control. She took one final breath, then lifted her hand slightly. A simple gesture, almost insignificant. "Close it." The gateway responded instantly. The light folded inward, collapsing with a quiet finality that felt heavier than any explosion. No flash, no shockwave. Just absence. The door was gone. Not locked, Not guarded, simply unnecessary. A one-way decision made by a species that had grown tired of asking where it was allowed to belong. Lyra stepped forward, turning away from where Sewell had been, toward a horizon that stretched endlessly beneath unfamiliar stars. Behind her, the sounds of humanity continued. Machines building, voices rising, life taking root in places no one had ever intended it to exist. No oversight. No permission, no limits. She allowed herself a small, quiet smirk, not out of defiance, but recognition. They had called it exile, a removal, a containment strategy, but exile only works if the ones you cast out still need the world you took from them. Lyra's gaze lifted to the alien constellations above, her voice barely more than a whisper carried by the wind. They think we're gone. A pause. Then softer, sharper, something new taking shape beneath the calm. We're just out of reach.